Welcome to our breakout session. Thank you for joining us. This session, over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be talking about how skills drive the transformation of the food system. We know a lot about the strategic importance of investing in education in all areas, but it's even more important now as the EU drives towards more sustainability, more resilience in the food chain. The updated European Skills Agenda prominently positions reskilling and upskilling of labour as one of the objectives to create the future of Europe. We also know that it's a lifelong process. It's not a done and out. So we're going to talk about the long-term societal impacts of skilling programs and learning programs and the quality assurances that are necessary as well when it comes to this sort of training, and what sort of robust frameworks or attainment of skills in practice can lead to an ongoing impact that we want to see. So we're going to talk about skills for transformation within the context of the food system. I have some great speakers to join me for this. We have the Education Director of EIT Food, Martin van der Kamp, who hosted that last session before we went into the breakout and had a set us up for this great discussion. We also have Barbara Mason, the Partnership Manager, Agri-Food Training Partnership at the University of Reading. Paola Pitia is Professor at the University of Teramo and the leader of the Ask Food Erasmus Plus project. And we are very grateful to have from the European Commission the Head of Unit of Innovation and EIT in DG EAC, Ingrid Rigler. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to start with a general round from each of you, just to give an introduction to what you think is important to discuss over the next 45 minutes. So perhaps, Ingrid, I can start with you to give me your opening thoughts.
Yes, on this topic, what I would like to say up front, and thanks a lot for the invitation, and thanks a lot for the organization of this fantastic conference and also for this breakout session, is that we have nowadays much more attention to skills in all EU policies. And I think the reason for this is that our societies, our economies, and I think the whole world we live in are currently going through a very profound change. So we are living a very rapid shift towards climate neutrality. We are living an age of digital transformation. And all of this, of course, changes dramatically the way we learn, we work, we take part in societies in general, and in general how we live. And this transition offers many opportunities for European competitiveness and innovation. But in order to be able to take advantage of these opportunities, we need to have the necessary skills. And then, of course, there is also the pandemic, which has had a tremendous impact on people, on their jobs, on their income, and many had to move to new jobs and needed new skills for that. So all of that has sort of accumulated in a paradigm shift on skills, which is why the European Commission adopted its new skills agenda last summer. And the aim of the skills agenda, as I'm sure you're aware, is to drive this twin transition, digital and green, and to recover from the socioeconomic impact of the COVID crisis. Now, this skills agenda is a comprehensive strategy, but of course, it also applies to all the sectorial policies of the Commission, because without appropriate skills, also in these single sectors, the innovation and growth potential the transition offers can't be exploited. In line with the topic of this conference, let's take the agriculture sector as an example, where there are skills needs for sustainability and digitalization in agriculture. And there again, the driver for this is the general vulnerability of food production because of increased globalization, because of increased competition, because of climate change, environmental concerns, etc. And the ultimate aim then for the skills drive in the agricultural sector is to secure food supply across the EU and to keep the agri production in Europe compatible and sustainable. So you can see in a nutshell, skills are the keys for success in all sectors. And this is why the skills agenda is firmly anchored in in a vast variety of EU policies. First and foremost, the European Green Deal, but also the new digital strategy, the new industrial strategy, the new SME strategy, the biodiversity strategy, and also, of course, the Farm to Fork strategy. So that would be my opening thoughts.
Thank you. Paola, let me come to you next to get your opening thoughts as well. And Ingrid has outlined there a lot of what's happening at EU level, but how do you see the landscape?
Well, the landscape is rather complex. I fully agree on what has been already introduced by Ingrid about the aspects related to skills, skills needs, skills update and upgrade in the overall, the entire workforce that is now working in a really more complex food system. The new borders or the new landscape of the food system implies the need of new knowledge, new competencies, new abilities also to match what the food system is asking. And the current training and higher education system could be not able to match, to provide the correct skills. So actually we have to modernize, we have to renew, we have to develop modern and disruptive tools that can help also not only the training system and the higher education system in developing this new landscape of skills, but also promote the development of tools that can anticipate the skills needs. And for this, projects like the Erasmus ones, based on my experience, can be really helpful to support this also modernization and in finding some solution to help and contribute to the modernization of the food system and also the innovation in the food system.
Barbara, let me turn to you because you've got specific interest in the agri-food sector as well. We'll be talking generally about the different tools needed. What's your perspective?
Yeah, so I think, thank you for that. I think what Ingrid and Paola were saying, what we're trying to do is actually to kind of create a concrete framework that can actually then help, focusing purely on the skills that people might need in order to contribute to innovation processes. So it's not that we suddenly want to provide a full framework for all kind of skills, but it really is about to make sure that innovative potential, that is something that we can focus we focus on, and to make sure that there's sufficient and robust kind of support there. So if you were in the plenary session just before, you already heard João and John refer to that, is that there is the Pact for Skills. So with our work, we're contributing to the Pact for Skills, and we are also an enabler and a multiplier for the the Partnership for Skills in agri-food that actually is being set up at this very moment. And the core piece that we've got in that is actually what we've been doing around those 8 core competencies that we think are the ones that are going to help people to be an effective innovator. And so these are 8, some of them are technical, some of them are more underpinning, but the key bit here is that we know that they are required ingredients for people to be able to have an active role. And this is something that when we've looked at that, we also wanted to make sure that this actually spreads throughout all layers of the food system. So it's not only that it is limited to people with higher degree education, but actually that it expands also into what João mentioned, the vocational training component as well, to make sure actually that we get that kind of robust support throughout the entire food system. Now, that doesn't mean that we have that all programs are all the same, but it's more, or that everybody needs to be able to contribute as an entrepreneur or at the same level, but it is more about understanding the context in which individuals operate, and how from that context that they can contribute effectively to innovation processes. So we've been putting this in place. We've been testing this with a lot of our partners, and we know that we are sort of on a good track, but the work is of course never done. And so this is something where we're building more and more components here in order to actually then very effectively drive skills programs. So it underpins all of our skills programs. So let me pause here, but yeah, there might be other bits and pieces that we can pick up later.
Barbara, your perspective, please, as well.
So one of the issues that we come across quite often when dealing with skills and upskilling the workforce is, in fact, the time it takes to do that, and the implications for that for an organisation, for an individual to leave what they're doing and to go away and do the training, or indeed for them to use their own personal time or any aspect of time that might take up. We know that that can have a significant impact on the motivation for actually engaging in that training and for even staying the course if business needs suddenly direct people to need to go back to work. We also are very aware that the time that it can take for impact in changes in business practices, whether that's at an organisation level or whether that's at the individual division that a learner or a newly upskilled person is working in, that time lag can often make or break the engagement with undertaking skills, and undertaking not necessarily for that particular learner perhaps, but for the next learner to come along for an organisation. So we do work, we very much focused on making sure, as Martin says, that the competencies that we are working towards are appropriate for the sector, for the individuals and for the organisations, which makes the puzzle enormously complicated when you put all that together. But it's also factoring in how we can create those agencies, that change that people are looking for doing in the shorter time as possible, so that there is that return on investment in time as well as other resources. So that's kind of where we're working hand in hand behind the scenes to make sure that what we do is appropriate for the learner. It's also appropriate for the business that they're temporarily leaving, and for the sector that they're going to then go back and influence. So I'll leave it there again. I think it'll pick up a little bit more in a minute.
Absolutely. And I will remind our audience participants that you can ask questions of our speakers as well. Just use the function online to type that in. Ingrid, we're hearing a little bit there that there's a variety of different models that are possible to drive reskilling and upskilling in different sectors. Can you give some insight into what perspectives you see within the DG and the Commission?
Yes, so when thanks for the question. When we are talking about models, what comes to my mind there are the various action tools we have included in the skills agenda. And let me start by something which I would consider the base action, the basis of any action, which is skills, intelligence, and forecasts. Because unless you actually know which kind of skills are requested by the labor market, can you actually intervene and try to train and educate these people in these for these jobs. And therefore there is an action in the skills agenda which is called skills intelligence. It tries to collect big data on job markets perspectives, also at the sectoral and the regional level. And actually this action is building on a pilot the CEDEFOP is running, the Center for the Development of Vocational Training, and it is based on big data analysis, and the Commission is building on that. And here we also try to get the participation of the social market, of the social partners, on board, in order to get their labor market projections. So this I would consider as a basis, skills and intelligence and forecast. And then a very important tool in the skills agenda is, and I think Martin, you've mentioned it, and maybe also Paula and Barbara too, is the Pact for Skills, which tries to bring the private and public stakeholders together to join forces. When I say stakeholders, who am I talking about? It's industries, it's the national authorities, the local authorities, the social partners, chambers of commerce, and very important, of course, education and training providers. So they join forces and they commit on a program for skills development. And in order to express this commitment, they actually sign a charter. And one of the policy tools we have in order to put these Pact for Skills into practice are the roundtables for specific industrial ecosystems. And this is linked to the new industrial strategy, which has identified 14 industrial ecosystems, and agri-food is one of them. And there you see already how strongly the skills agenda is linked, for example, to the new industrial strategy, where it is said that actually the Pact for Skills should become active on these 14 industrial ecosystems. And actually the roundtable for the agri-food system is taking place, and they try to analyze the skills gaps and the challenges there, and they try to come up with solutions in order to address them, like, for example, adapting academic programs to have more food engineers, or setting up partnerships between learning institutions and companies. So it's not only about academic training, but also on-the-job training, committing SMEs to invest in skills and telling them what sort of European and national funds there are they can access in order to do so, and many other things. And very operational still, staying on this one, still the implementation of the Pact for Skills, actually, and there the Erasmus Plus program comes in, the blueprint alliances for sectorial cooperation on skills. And again, this blueprint could be on all of the 14 sectors of the industrial sectors identified in the industrial strategy. And these are very specific sector-specific partnerships which try to address the skills shortages, and they also gather data in order to analyze major trends. They come up with a skill strategy, with a growth strategy. They design occupational profiles. They come up with a long-term action plan, and in the end, the idea is to roll out this action plan at the national and at the regional level. So there are many tools actually in the skills agenda, which I could mention here, but I think these are the most relevant ones, and I would like to stop here.
Barbara, let me ask you about this point that Ingrid raised, anticipating skills. How do we do that? How do we identify what will be the requirements?
So that crystal ball gazing is of course going to be an enormous problem that we have to face, and it is hugely important. I mean, the way that we have done that in recent times is to very much, as Ingrid mentioned, talk with our stakeholders, and absolutely in agreement that the stakeholders that we need to engage with are a wide variety of individuals, of organizations. And it goes, in some respects, it goes beyond just the individuals within the agri-food sector. We're looking at how it can influence outside and be influenced by. So it's very much keeping an engaged dialogue going with organizations, with the training providers. They're often the ones that can get the first insights into what people are asking for. You know, questions and feedbacks at the end of courses. What would you like to see next? Often provide really useful snippets that in and of themselves may not be totally helpful, but are really useful for conversation starters and things to pick up on. So it's very much keep talking and engaging with people, engaging with the end users, engaging with everybody across all sorts of sectors, and bringing all that together in some way is probably more difficult than gaining the information in the first place. Is actually making some sort of sense out of it. But yeah, it's very much about pulling all that information that we can get. And through the EIT Food Network, of course, that is enormously helpful. That's got a vast amount of knowledge at its fingertips, and the partners that we work with there provide us with all sorts of information that are very useful to build some really concrete ideas and things from.
Paola, I know the Ask Food project was looking at this as well. What did you find out?
Thank you very much. Overall, the project was a Knowledge Alliance Erasmus project actually, and this gives us also the opportunity to collaborate and develop also a small network of different actors representing different stakeholders. So this was a small community actually that was already working together with the aim to create a small ecosystem of tools which work together towards building an interactive repository of emerging skills and professional profiles linked to the current needs and the future trends in the food related sectors. Actually, we have been working on several virtual tours because we would like to design and to pilot some of them. And in respect of the skills, I would like to mention here two out of them. The first is the forecast aggregator. Actually, we combined the trends we developed the trends by scenario analysis within specific disciplines or areas, and we combine these trends with the multi-sector innovative competencies that can be identified as the emerging core skill set for the future of the food and food-related sectors. Actually, we identify 8 areas that we put all together under an acronym called Tempests. Actually, they are. This name is an acronym of technology, economic, market habits, policy and regulatory framework, environment, science, transformative industry, and societal dynamics. We analyze each of them via a series of drivers of change, skills, new jobs, and all of them was developed by using some signals. These were documents, reports on the specific areas, and we analyze them by keywords and all the possible contents that could lead us to different skills needs, knowledge needs, and competencies, both sector-related, non-sector related, and personal. And this was a very good experience because we also piloted within specific events, and we open a dialogue with the different stakeholders, industry representative associations of the sector, and we discussed about different of these signals and also trends in different areas. The second tool, virtual tool I would like to mention here briefly is the interactive training app identifier that actually is a series, of tools also in this case that are aimed to provide a self-assessment environment to avoid the skills mismatch and to support the personal learning by the individual in order to be more, matching the job market needs, the current one and the future ones. We have been working on some profiles or professional careers, in particular the food manufacturing, the food service, and last but not least, because this is absolutely new, I think the food scientist or food researcher that can be both at academic and industry level. So this was something we tried to contribute somehow. And I just would like to say that when we started to design and to develop the proposal of this project, actually, we were actually analyzing these issues here that we are discussing today, and this was 5 years ago. So actually, you can see how important has become this topic here.
Well, thank you. And Martin, let me ask you about the approach of the KICs. Anyone at this conference is familiar with the KICs, in particular in connecting the skills needed to drive societal transformation.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because that's indeed become so very prominent, and so it's not just sort of solving skills gaps anymore. to address market failures, but actually I've become way more proactive in actually making sure that the bright minds that we work with are equipped to drive positive change. And so as the KICs jointly under the EIT, we've been working on that, and each KIC is slightly different because each kind of area is sort of, that a KIC is responsible for has a different makeup. So it's really responding to the context of the kind of the sector that we're in. But generally, our approach is really about understanding innovation and entrepreneurship education within context, and I think that's a key one there. To understand that context, but then to also see kind of what does impact for sort of a green and digitally connected society look like, and how do we then stimulate this? And so this is one where we've been having some excellent dialogues with some of the other KICs to learn from each other, to actually see kind of how do we do that, and where are the crossovers there. The key organizing phenomenon is that innovation and entrepreneurship, and that needs to be excellent, of course, but then there are ways of making that tangible. And so challenge-based learning is, of course, the key word here on how we do this. Experiential learning, so really learning by doing, and to really apply sort of that learning in context to drive also innovation processes. So the knowledge triangle here is really important, that we drive sort of entrepreneurial skills as a whole, that people can find themselves sort of being entrepreneurial wherever they find themselves in their career. And sometimes that might mean devising new industrial solutions that can be taken up by industry. Sometimes it means venture creation, and sometimes it means actually engaging with policy or with broader civil society. But the key point there is that we've got that viewpoint on impact that is there, and that we always need to drive towards. And one of the things that we found in this, that actually we sometimes were kind of struggling. We knew that kind of the projects that our learners were doing, that they are interesting, but sometimes it still feels kind of detached to the longer term socioeconomic impact in 10, 15 years, and to anticipate what that might be looking like. And so this is one where, I mean, Barbara already mentioned that it's that lag between the intervention and when we actually might see some tangible change. And we try to shorten this, but typically, actually, it's about 10 years after people graduate from the undergraduate studies that they will take the step to become an entrepreneur. And so this is something that we're trying to shorten, but even if we were to shorten that to say 4 or 5 years, it actually can fall outside of the view of the KIC to follow this up. And so this is one where, for us, that impact model is very important, to know that our sort of work then has those longer term contributions. And that is then particularly demonstrated, of course, with those new innovations that are coming out of the innovation, sort of the education processes, and to stimulate that. So across all of the KICs, we've also been making sure that the learners, that if they have something that is sort of possible to spin out or to create a startup out of, that we also do that support mechanism. So also working on that broader entrepreneurial culture that is also required.
Well, Ingrid and Martin has touched on it there. How do we measure the impact? How do we actually quantify whether these methods that we're talking about are having the desired outcomes?
Yes. Well, this actually is of course a very important question, because evaluation of what we do tells us whether we have been doing things successfully. And as you know, the Commission evaluates all of its policies and programs and projects exactly to see if the EU intervention has worked and if it has actually delivered its desired effects. And our evaluations judge the effectiveness, the efficiency, the relevance, the coherence, and the EU added value of what we do. So it judges the performance against our original expectations to see if actually our intervention was fit for purpose, if it should be adapted, amended, or even abandoned if it has not been successful. And there, of course, we have to go beyond to look at what has happened, so the actual outputs, and also look into how much what we have been doing has actually changed the reality on the ground. So what was the consequence, the impact of what we are doing? And there it is very important to look at evidence of causality, to see which action has had which effect, and if our action has had the desired effect or other effects, and to make sure that the effect we are seeing has not actually been caused maybe by some other factors or some other actions, and not by what we have been doing. And this indeed is a very tricky part, but it is the most important and the most relevant part of our evaluations. The actions I described before, coming from the skills agenda, are of course now currently not mature enough to be impact assessed. A couple of years always have to go by before you can do that. But I can give as an example the evaluation of the previous Education and Training 2020 framework, which has been assessed, and where the most important recommendations came out that the curricula should be better tuned to the labor market, that skills need to be better anticipated, that cooperation with employers is very important, and especially the key competences, the transversal competences like critical thinking, problem solving, communication. These are the competences which are required, and these are kind of recommendations which come out of evaluations and which are always extremely useful to feed back into new policy development.
Ingrid, you read my mind. This was the question I was going to come on to next for Barbara, indeed. Building on this idea of measuring impact, how then do you work with employers, the labour market?
So there are all sorts of ways that can be done. It can be done on a large scale, where it's through focus groups and working together to identify what it is that they need from a collective perspective, all the way down to working at almost an individual level when we look at what the learner's output could be from training. And as we've already talked about, the length of time it takes, the number of years it can take to measure that sort of level of impact is not necessarily something that will encourage somebody to reinvest if it's going to take that long. You know, the time moves so quickly, particularly within the agri-food sector, where margins are so tight and things move so much more quickly. So one of the ways that we found to do it in one of our tiny steps that starts to come together in a cumulative way is to make sure that whatever trainings, assessment mechanisms are used, whether they're formal or informal assessments, serve a dual purpose, so that each individual learner is able to demonstrate that they've advanced their competencies, and particularly in the underpinning competencies that Ingrid has just mentioned, as well as the more contextualized technical ones. But also, in so doing, when they demonstrate that, they're producing something that they can then take back to their organization, which in itself is then useful and helpful for that organization. So I'm talking something like a report that could be presented at board level that is proposing changes to processes that could be made, or it could even be something at a technical level that we're looking at changes in atmospheres within packaging, for instance, that can have an influence on shelf life. So it can be on these small steps as well as on a much bigger basis that allows that that acceptance that the trainings are worth doing, it's worth spending the time in. Earlier on in the conference, somebody was talking this morning about trust and building trust in systems. And if we can bring in a level of that trust for the value and the quality of the training through evidencing that it's impactful for a learner and for their organisation, then for me that's so much more powerful than just going beyond this is another piece of training that we've sent our employee on. And I guess it's also important to think that while we're talking about lifelong learning, this is something that we encourage people to do all the way through their careers, not just sort of at start points, that it's something that moves with them. The same with that measures of impact, that they continue to be something that we can do in a small scale immediately, as well as working towards that much bigger, longer term needs of societal impact. And I think that will help us sort of engage a little bit more and make it somewhat more impactful.
Paola, same question to you. How do you see the role of training and so on in working with employers?
That's an important aspect as well. I mean, that we were dealing also within the Ask Food project because actually the one of the points, the key points we have also to an issue that we have to overcome when trying to innovate or even contribute to the innovation and sustainability of the food system is to connect the workplace that can be in the most of the cases the food industry, and who is making the training. I mean, the higher education, the universities, and so on. So to favor a common language among them, and also to align their objectives. This is a key element. So actually, within the Aspect project, we have been working on developing also new approaches, training methodologies, in which we try to put together, working together with the aim to promote both innovation and new skills and competencies of the trainees, in this case, where students or PhDs or even younger startups that were involved in order to, in order to actually have to be effective and to have the possibility to really obtain at the end the common target we were planning to achieve. This was carried out within this new method training approach that we set, which is the reverse incubator, in which the trainees were challenged. So actually, as already mentioned by Martin, a challenge-based training approach towards entrepreneurship as regards the trainers, but also trying to develop innovation jointly between higher education, the trainees, and the food company. And it was a really good experience from this point of view, because all participants, we made different editions in different countries. We find a good response, and the evaluation was very high. Actually, we could assess this. And this is important. So to find the way to align the needs between higher education and the job market. One aspect important I would like to mention is that obviously we cannot take this as a general rule, because we needed to align the different let's say, sectors and that are involved in this process. We have to understand if we are developing it within a study program or in a lifelong learning perspective, and the different methodologies and approaches need to be applied then.
Well, thank you. Martin, one of the things that employers often like to see as evidence are certifications of some sort. What's your take on that? Is there a direction that you want to see going?
Yeah, definitely. And so I think it is really about making sure that people, when you invest in skills development, that you know what you're going to get back. So certification is absolutely essential. But here, actually, we're running into again quite a tricky area, because actually not all certificates are necessarily regarded as being the same. And so particularly if we're thinking about international mobility, then actually certificates that people might have picked up in country A might not be that easily recognized in country B, and it's not because there's no framework, because there is a good framework for this, but actually that employers might not necessarily recognize the providers that have been engaging in that training. And so actually to unlock that innovation potential, we do need to have certification systems that are actually really supporting that, but that also are kind of evidencing that the trainings have been really relevant. So it's not just that the certificate is there for kind of for show, but that employers really know what does this mean that my employees then can do as a consequence of this. And so this is something that for certification systems is absolutely essential, of course. And so this is one where we've been working away at kind of how can we do this? How can we recognize, for example, also informal or non-formal forms of learning that people acquire when they're in the sort of on the job, and that means that those skills need to in some way become articulated just as much as if someone were to take a university course or a vocational training course. And so for us, we are working for sort of on sort of finding a way of making sort of certification systems in some way commensurable. So there's commensurability, of course, across the whole of Europe that is already happening as a result of the European Union and all of the investments there. So we really want to be aligned with that. But then on sort of below that, we want to provide a further layer that actually people can have their credentials certified in order to then support that broader mobility, particularly to recognize that informal and non-formal learning, particularly in, of course, the innovation space. But so, and this is one where we've been figuring out on how do we do that as a sort of a complementary action. And that's been a really interesting kind of exercise to actually understand the means of looking at, for example, micro-credentials and co-opting ideas from there, co-opting other systems, and to create something that actually fuses some of those elements together. So that's been a really interesting thing to do, and this is something where hopefully next year we will be launching an initiative as a pilot stage to trial that on for a number of employees to demonstrate that actually this resonates. So it's a very relevant area, and something that we're very passionate about. And it's strange you don't find that many people that are passionate about certification, but here we are.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you. You've mentioned there the things to look ahead to, which is what I want to ask my three ladies now as a final wrap up. Just briefly, Ingrid, what is there anything to look out for our audience coming up?
Well, let me add here, and this actually nicely continues with what Martin has just mentioned, upcoming initiatives, the micro-credentials. And indeed, what are micro-credentials? The aim is to widen the learning opportunities to smaller learning experiences, tailored, flexible learning experiences. So it is a flexible form of education, and the micro-credentials would certify the outcome of these learning experiences and would recognize the knowledge acquired behind it. And this is, of course, ideal for upskilling and reskilling, and ideal for complementing the traditional qualifications. But then here comes in what Barbara, I think, has mentioned, is people immediately ask, what's the value of these short learning experiences? What's the quality? How do you recognize it? And for as long as these questions are around, there is no trust and there is no acceptance. And this is why the Commission will soon come with the proposal for a Council recommendation on micro-credentials to help facilitate the development, the use and the recognition of that. Through cooperation between member states, issuing guidelines, through using quality assurance methods which have been tested and agreed, using EU tools like the ECTS credit system or the NARICS, the National Recognition Centers, or including the micro-credentials in the national qualification frameworks. So these are the ideas which would be around, and I think that the the EIT community and the Food Kick in particular would be a great test bed to experiment the micro-credentials and to measure their impact. And I'm very glad, Martin, to hear that you're very enthusiastic about it, because I think we are too, and that would be a perfect match.
Thank you. And Paola, your wrapping up thoughts, your key takeaways for our audience, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I have to say that actually the Food Project has launched this series of virtual tools open to all interested people. And we think that these are a good baseline to launch new initiatives. So, that can be developed at different levels, higher education, training, vocational education and training as well. And we really hope to continue in this innovation in the training methodologies in education to support the innovation and sustainability in the food system. There is not too much time to say anything else.
Well, thank you, Barbara. Your closing words, you've got the last word for this particular breakout session.
Thank you. I'll be extremely quick here with this. So our next steps, very much as Martin says, is to launch this pilot for next year, but it's very much about bringing together all the aspects of determining quality through the courses that we work with and the certifications and the outputs that learners achieve. So yes, I'm really excited that we're all excited about pulling all these bits and pieces together, because that's what we'll be doing for through the course of next year.
Absolutely. And thank you all very much for your input into this breakout session. Unfortunately, we've got a couple of questions right at the end of our session, but I would encourage our audience members just to stick around in the networking. We're taking a networking break now. So there is the opportunity there for you to keep talking to people, keep engaging. Those tools are on your screen. You'll be able to find them when we go to our next session, which is the networking break. And then we're going to come back to discuss the investing in impactful solutions. So we've talked a lot about the skills needed. We're going to talk later on this afternoon about how to invest. Thank you to our panelists who have been great and informative as always. Thank you to the audience for your attention. We're going to take a 1 hour lunch break now. So do join us back here again for the plenary session, which will be taking place from 1:15. So do join me for that. Have a nice lunch, have a nice break, stretch your legs, and come back full of energy and enthusiasm for our final sessions this afternoon.